she's going to make an announcement and introduce our guest speaker.
In case your calendar is not full for November, and you are a member of the ADK Club, and you have volunteered sometime in the last year, we would like to invite you to the Volunteer Recognition Picnic. Basically, it's a social. It's trying to be scheduled after some of your outdoor activities. It is scheduled for Sunday, November 18th. It's in Brighton at the Carmen Clark Lodge at Brighton Town Park. It is from noon to 3. We will have a great meal, and I think one of the big draws is we have 8 REI gift certificates to give away in a drawing to people who have volunteered. They're $25 gift certificates, but who wouldn't like an REI gift card? Anyway, we'd love you to come on out and get to know more ADK members at the volunteer picnic on November 18th. Okay? So for tonight, you're all here to hear J.R. Harris. And J.R. has just come off his most recent adventure in the Dolomites. And while he was there, AARP was tracking him down. They sent a photographer from Norway to find him on the trail and take his picture and get his story. So he will be in next month's AARP magazine. So look for that edition coming up next month. And his busy schedule, after he talks to you tonight, not immediately, but in the next week or so, or two, he'll be heading out to British Columbia to speak at the Banff Film Festival. And so eventually, if you see future episodes of that, you may see JR there. Anyway, he is the author of the book Way Out There that has sold out tonight. And he has adventures to tell you about how he got to where he is today. JR, welcome.
This is very cool. Thank you all for coming. Really nice to be here. My talk tonight is trail talk from an older kicker. Before I start, I'd just like to clarify that title. I'm not the one that's old. It's the dirt that's old, okay? So it's trail talk from an older kicker. I kick old dirt. Just wanted to say that. So now, I've been kicking this old trail dirt for a very long time, for well over 50 years. Starting in the 1960s, and even before then, I've done more than 50 long-distance treks of 3 weeks or more, all over the world. And all over this time, all during this time, a lot of people have asked me a lot of questions about wilderness travel and what that experience is like. So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to go through the 10 top issues or questions that people have had about wilderness travel. And for each of the 10, I'm going to take you on a trip around the world on one of the treks that I was on that is relevant to that particular topic or issue. And after that, I'm going to summarize it by giving you a short list of the 4 or 5 things that I've kind of learned over all these years. And then if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take the questions. So let's lace them up and get started. So now the first question and issue that everybody is curious about is like, why do you do it? You know, or in New York, sometimes it comes out, I live in New York City, sometimes that question comes out more like, are you crazy? You know, what's wrong with you, dude? So, the thing is that the reason why I go out there are a lot of reasons. I like the adventure, I like the excitement, I like being in a different environment. But most of all, I do it because I'm very curious. I'm curious about the natural world. Curiosity is the engine that drives exploration. It's that need to get out there, see it on your own, to do it in person. And so that's why I do it. One of the things that I'm most curious about are people who live in really remote areas. And so back in 2012, because I was interested in the Inca. Now, when most people think about the Inca, they think about Machu Picchu. But I wasn't really that interested in kind of deserted buildings. I was more interested in the descendants of the Inca. And I was told that if you go into the Andes far back enough, way up and behind the mountains, you could still find people who are still living there, still living the same type of life that they've been living for hundreds of years, still wearing the same traditional clothing, still doing the same types of herding, farming that they've done all these years. Some of them are so remote that they don't even speak Spanish, they still speak Quechua, their native language. When I heard about this, I said, I gotta go there. I gotta check that out. And so in 2012, I headed out there. So the first thing I did is I went to Cusco, stayed there for about 5 days to acclimatize. Cusco's about 14,000 feet. And while I was there, they had this ceremony one Sunday where people from neighboring villages in and around Cusco came in for a parade, celebration, kind of a fiesta. Each group from each different community had their own costumes, their own bands, their own instruments. And it was really nice to get kind of a sense or a feeling of what their lifestyle was like before I headed out. Then I got on a bus and rode for many, many hours into the, up into the Andes. And this is Iceland. Iceland is a sacred mountain, sacred to the Inca, and it's about 22,000 feet high. This, my campsite here, is about 14,500 feet. That little stream there was part of the glacier that you can see in the background. So the water was very, very cold. So my idea was to walk around this mountain because I was told that there were people that lived on the other side that I might be able to find. The trail around the mountain is about 50 miles, 52 miles. And I was going around kind of counterclockwise. Well, sure enough, there were people back there. This woman here, still wearing traditional clothing, she's carrying her child on her back. And she was actually herding llamas and alpacas back there. This is where they live. These homes are made of sod bricks, and the roof is puma grass that's kind of growing right there on the floor there. And you can see some of the stone corrals that they have. They're herding llamas and alpacas. Sometimes in these corrals, sometimes they're actually just free roaming on the slopes there. Very, very interesting. People are very, very friendly. And then I got lucky. I made a camp, and as I was there, I saw 4 guys come up on horseback, and they set up a tent not too far from me, and they were looking at me, and I'm like, what is this dude doing here by himself? He's got no horse, he's got no guide. And eventually their curiosity got the best of them and came over to speak to me. I can kind of make it in Spanish pretty well. I live in New York City. And so it turns out that one of these guys was a shaman. And he had come to the sacred mountain to make an offering. And the other 2 guys were his, other 3 were his helpers and acolytes. And asked me what I was doing there. When I told them that I was interested in people who live in remote areas and that I was specifically interested in the Inca, he invited me to attend the ceremony that he was going to do that night. So around 8 o'clock that night, he came over to my campsite. They grabbed me, they took me back to their campsite, to their tent. This picture was taken inside the tent. And this gentleman here is the shaman. And what he's doing is he's preparing an offering that he's going to give to the sacred mountain. The whole thing took about an hour and a half, and what he was doing is he's actually putting different items on this sheet here, items that they brought up by horseback. Before he actually took out the offering, and I'll tell you what he did with it in a second, but we had to first chew these cocoa leaves that you see there, so after a while I really kind of fuzzy what was happening. But after he finished making the offering, he had one of his helpers go outside and build a fire. Now there's no wood up there, they had to bring all the wood up on horseback. Made a fire, and then he put the offering on the fire. We weren't allowed to watch him do it. He made us turn our back. But then when he put the offering on the fire, we were able then to turn around and watch it. He watched it very intently for about 20 minutes, and then he declared that the offering had been accepted by the mountain gods, and that the ceremony was over. So this is exactly why I went out there. I got really lucky. I got to meet people who were still living that same lifestyle, and I got to witness a ceremony that I was told very few outsiders had ever seen. So that's kind of an example of why I go out there, because I'm just a very curious guy. That brings us to number 2, skills. And so people say, well, what kind of skills do you need? What do you need to know? My thing about skills is that if you go to an environment that's different from your own, you're probably going to have to learn a new set of skills that are consistent with that environment. And so it's the same here with wilderness travel. So now on this trip here, 2008, 10 years ago, I went to Newfoundland. And there's Grosmoor National Park. Now, if you speak a little bit of French, you know that Gros kind of means big, and Moor means kind of dismal, dreary, bleak. So the name of this national park is the Big Dreary, big, bleak, whatever you want to call it. So, I'm going to read to you the brochure for this national park, where they try to get people to come out and visit the national park. There's a mountain range called the Long Range Mountains that are the basic attraction here. So it says, the Long Range Mountains provide hikers with some of the most scenic and challenging hiking terrain in eastern North America. Hiking in the Long Range Mountains is physically and mentally challenging. It is remote, strenuous, and potentially hazardous. There are no built trails on the Long Range, although there are a number of suggested backcountry routes. These routes are not marked with signs or maintained in any manner. Hikers need backcountry travel experience, be self-reliant, and proficient using maps and compass to navigate unfamiliar wilderness terrain. Now, who wants to go there? Well, there was one fool that wanted to go. And I chose this trip about skills because this is the only trip I ever took in all the years that I've been doing this, where in order to go into the backcountry, you have to pass a skills test. You have to prove to the rangers that you were proficient in map and compass navigation. Now, backcountry permit back then cost $125. And the deal is they made you buy the permit first, and then they made you take the test. And if you didn't pass the test, you need to get your money back. So they wanted to make sure that people who went up there knew what they were doing. And so I knew I wasn't going to have a problem with the test. And after I took the test, now before I tell you what happened, this is kind of a list of 10 basic wilderness skills. You folks are mostly ADK members and outdoors people, so you're probably familiar with these. What's interesting to me about a list like this is that some of the items on the list are skills that you would use every day, such as map and compass navigation, maybe crossing rivers and streams, finding weather prediction, things like that. Other items on this list, are items that you may never have to use, such as first aid or building an emergency shelter, things like that, finding food. So the thing about skills is that you need to learn things that you're going to need every day, but you're also going to need to learn things that you might not need every day, but if you need it, you know that you have it. And the reason and the benefit for that is that you build confidence in being able to be out there and to not only survive, but to enjoy your trip. So I was wondering how you're going to enjoy a trip at a place called the Big Dismal. But after I passed the test, they gave me this thing. It looks like a test tube with a fuse coming out. I put it next to the spoon just to show you how small it was. And they told me to put it in the top of my backpack so that if I don't come out on the date I'm supposed to come out, they can turn on some kind of machine that's going to show them exactly where this thing is. And as long as I stayed close to my backpack, if I got in trouble, eventually somebody might come out, or a helicopter would come out and get me. So here's the reason why this place is so hard to navigate. This is called Patagonia. Now this picture was taken in the middle of the day, and the undergrowth is very, very dense, as you can see. You can walk into something like this heading north, but by the time you come out, you don't know what direction you're heading in. And so it's very, very confusing. And the place is covered with this Patagonia. That's the reason why they want you to be proficient in navigation. Now you can see that once you get above the tree line, it's not too bad. And eventually, I was able to get to the top of this mountain here and do this old selfie where I put my camera on a rock, press the time release shutter for 10 seconds, jump in front, strike a macho pose, and take a picture. Unfortunately, not long after this picture was taken, I dropped my compass and stepped on it, and it broke. So I knew I wasn't going to be able to continue the trip. That was out of the question. As a matter of fact, I had really serious reservations about being able to find my way back the way I came, because it was just so complicated. So I was in a bit of a bother right here. This is looking back down. And so what I had to do essentially, and all the green down here on the bottom is that Patagonia. If you see that lake way back in the distance, that's the direction heading south. I was going to try to get back where I started, but I couldn't do it the way I came. So what I had to do was make my way back to that big lake back there, then kind of go right when I got there, which would be going west, and eventually I would be back kind of in the area where I started. So it took me about 3.5 days to get to this point. It took me 5 days to get back. But to wrap this up about skills, I was able to get back because knowing what those skills are, even though one of the skills was map and compass navigation, even though I didn't have a compass anymore, if you have the skills and you have the confidence, you can kind of improvise and make it happen and figure out a way to get out of a tough situation. So that's why I picked skills for this particular trip. Which brings us to the third one, which is planning. Now, planning is, in my opinion, the key to a successful trip. When a trip goes wrong, 9 times out of 10 is because it was poorly planned. And you walk out the door, if the trip is not planned properly, you're in trouble the moment you step out of the door before you can get where you're going. Now, most people, when they go into the wilderness, they sign up and they go with a group, and the outfitter, or whoever it is taking care of all the logistics. All you really have to do is to show up, and it's all taken care of. But if you travel on your own, you have to do all the planning yourself. And I can't really emphasize enough how important it is to plan. This trip that I picked for this one here, the John River, was in Arctic Alaska. above the Arctic Circle in the Brooks Range. And it was 30 years ago, before there was an internet, before there was cell phones, before there was satellite phones, before there was GPS. The trip was 23 days. And what it was I first had to fly into an Inuit village up there, an Eskimo village, then walk 10 days across the tundra, at which point there was a lake, and I had chartered a bush pilot to fly in with a canoe and some more food. And then I would drag the canoe from the lake over to a river, and then paddle down the river for another 10 days, and get back to a small settlement where I would end the trip. So a lot of logistics involved in putting this trip together. And so what I'd like to do is read you another excerpt from my book to give you an idea of what it was like to plan a trip like this 30 years ago. I went with a friend of mine, by the way. So we were doing this trip accompanied by a local outfitter with experience in the environment. All of the planning would be taken care of. We would be given a list of what to bring, advice on what to expect, and we would not have to deal with the complex logistics. Doing it independently meant assuming all the risks, which emphasized the importance of careful, detailed preparation. Our planning began more than 6 months before the departure date. In that largely pre-internet era, we typed and sent snail mail letters to National Park Service and to anyone else who might have any information about northern Alaska. There were books to read about the Arctic and the Brooks Range. There were indigenous people to learn about as well. The Nunamiut or Inupiat Eskimos in the northern part of the Brooks Range, and the Athabascan Indians who inhabited the southern regions. We researched and charted weather trends, made estimates of daily time and travel distances, got information on airline schedules, lodging, charter flights, canoe rentals, made lists of food and gear requirements, evaluated warmth to weight ratios for different articles of clothing, and estimated budgets. We learned about areas' flora and fauna, including how to travel safely in grizzly country, and discussed various emergency scenarios and how we would deal with them. We gathered information about wilderness first aid, put together a comprehensive first aid kit. I ordered topographic maps from the region from the U.S. Geological Service and waited patiently for them to arrive in the mail. Now you can get them online and push a couple of buttons and you got it. We purchased a lightweight 12-gauge shotgun and went to a gun club every week to learn gun safety and practice shooting. Bear spray, must-have today for safe travel in grizzly country, was not available back then. Also not available were bear-proof food containers or cell phones. Once we left our point of departure, we'd have no method of communication and be totally out of touch with the rest of the world. Our planning took nothing for granted. In January of 1986, 6 months before we departed, the malfunction of a simple O-ring destroyed the space shuttle Challenger. And just 3 months later, a mishandled safety test resulted in a nuclear power plant disaster at Chernobyl. The impact of these tragic events was not lost on us. And so, that's the idea of planning. The flip side of planning is that it's one of the most fun things to do. It's very exciting to anticipate all the things that might happen. And when you finally come back from a trip where everything went exactly as you planned it, if you've ever done this, you know how great that feels. So planning, obviously very, very important item. Here's a list. Now, when I do my planning, I have 4 basic categories. One is food, one is gear, one is clothing, and one is logistics. So here's an example of food. This wasn't from this particular trip. This is about a 12-day trip. That's the kind of food I would take, mostly freeze-dried and dehydrated. Clothing. This is for a 12-day Arctic trip, so there's a lot of cold weather clothing here. Gear, you can see the backpack, sleeping bag, tent, pots and pans, stove, etc., etc. Everything in those 3 slides that I just showed you have to go into that backpack right there. For that trip, was about 52 pounds. If you go alone, of course you have to carry everything because there's nobody else to share the common items with. And so here you go, first part of the trip, 10 days of walking along the John River. And here's the boat, here's the float plane that came in with the canoe and the rest of our food. And then there were the 10 days on the John River floating back down to the North Fork of the KICKER River. So that's kind of what it's like for planning. Great satisfaction when you come back and you're still alive, and you got all your fingers and toes, and everything went exactly the way that you wanted. Which brings us to fitness. You know, fitness is kind of obvious, right? You know, you gotta be fit if you want to do this kind of stuff. The funny thing is that, you know, like 40 years ago, nobody ever asked me about fitness. You know, nowadays it's like, dude, you know, aren't you getting a little old to be doing that? So, you know, you just have to, you have to be fit. But people are curious about it. So I picked this particular trip in Norway to Newfoundland National Park a couple of years ago. And I picked it because it was a rough trip. It wasn't really dangerous or anything like that. It was just very, very strenuous. For example, here's the end of the road. Now, I got to Oslo, Norway. I took a bus heading north. As far as the road would go, you would see the little turnaround there. That's as far as the road goes. Bus goes back to Oslo. You can also see that as soon as you step off the bus and start hiking, you're going uphill. Now, I usually like a trip where maybe the first day is kind of level, you know, you get used to it. But from here, no, as soon as you start going right uphill, this picture is taken about 1,000 feet up. Then kept going up from here. It's a very large lake. This is about 2,000 feet from the road that you just saw. And this is where I was going. This is a mountain called Whittington's. It's about 8,000 feet high. It is the second highest mountain in Norway. Interesting thing about this mountain used to be the highest mountain in Norway. But it used to have a snowfield on it, and the height was measured from the top of the snowfield. Then over the years, the snow started to melt until it got down and it went below the second highest mountain, and so now it is the second highest mountain in Norway. So there's a close-up picture of the summit there. It still has a bit of a snowfield on it. It took me about 4 days to get there. Tough hiking. I made a camp down in the valley, and I decided to do the summit trip in 1 day up and back. And so here's looking back from the top, the snowfield on my way back down. Down in that valley is where I had my camp. So real good trip, and I went back a different way, so it took me another 5 days to get out. So the whole thing was maybe 10, 11 days on this particular trip. And here I am smiling at the summit. And I picked this trip as an example of fitness because it came right after my 70th birthday 4 years ago. So, bring us to attitude. You know, on a trip, everything goes great until it's not great anymore. And in the kind of rush to learn different skills and to be fit and all that, people kind of overlook the importance of attitude. But attitude can be extremely, extremely important. And it could mean the difference, you know, without hyperbole, between life and death. You know, when things go bad, you know, they say only the strong survive. But in reality, the survivor is usually the one who's able to keep a positive attitude when things go bad. And so, attitude is very important. And usually what happens with attitude is, you know, if one or two things go bad on a trip, you know, that's not too bad. Every trip has its ups and downs. Where having a good attitude becomes really important is when every single day something happens. And it becomes harder and harder, more and more difficult to keep it together and keep it positive when everything is just kind of grinding you down. And so an example of this was a trip I took in Australia in 1997, in the Australian Alps in the mountains, 3-week trip, this again with 2 friends of mine. And it was the Australian Alps National Park. On this particular year, we got driven to the trailhead about 30 miles from the nearest town. The guy dropped us off and left us there, and then we started hiking from there, only to find out that there had been a drought situation, and all the places where we expected to find water, there was no water. And even the perennial streams where the water is supposed to be consistent and reliable, when we got there, either there was no water or just a muddy pool or a filthy, slimy, several puddles of water to deal with. Now, in addition, there were all the other things that make hiking in Australia very tough. You ever done any hiking in the mountains in Australia? You can see how steep they are. There are no real trails going up there. It's extremely hot. And so many things in Australia make hiking very tough. There are 3 types of snakes there. They're all poisonous. There are biting lizards and ants. Even the plants, there's a plant called Patagonia with really thick and very, very sharp leaves that can go right through the sole of your boot if you step on one. So it was every day in heat, and you hike all day, you make a camp, and then you have to spend another hour or 2 looking for water. And if you can't find water, not only can you not drink, but you can't eat either because you're eating freeze-dried food and you need this 2 cups of water to reconstitute the food. So it was really a tough trip. But what we did, the 3 of us, knowing what we were up against, we actually sat down and had a discussion about it. And we said, listen guys, we got to keep it together. We know that one person can drag the other 2 down. We don't want that to happen. And so from then on, we just did what we had to do. The main rule was don't complain about anything. Just deal with it, make the best of it, and try to keep it together. You can't really see heat in a photograph, but it was just a really rough and rugged trip. Came across some places where people were living. This is supposed to be a reliable street next to where this guy's cabin was, but apparently this guy a couple of years ago said, you know what, I'm getting out of here. You know, this place is crazy. So he was long gone. But in the end, there we are. We're still smiling, still made it, and we made this trip primarily because we were able to keep a good attitude and keep it positive when every single day, all day long, it was just a rough slog. These things happen. We're also smiling because we just each finished drinking 2 liters of water. And we were feeling really good about it. So 6 is weather. Now, many years ago, I was hiking in the Colorado Rockies, and as I got up to the tree line, there was a sign right next to the trail there, and the headline of the sign said, "Weather doesn't care." And the sign went on to say that if the weather's looking sketchy, right now when you're reading the sign, don't go any farther because up there, over the pass and on your way down to the next valley, at any point in time, you can get rain, thunderstorms, whiteout conditions, whatever. Don't do it because weather doesn't care. So I started to think about that, how weather really doesn't care. Weather is the great kind of equalizer, because weather doesn't care if you're rich or poor, Weather doesn't care if you're smart or stupid. Weather doesn't care if you're white, black, green, or orange. Weather doesn't care if you've got places to go or things to do. Weather doesn't care if you're an important person back home. Weather doesn't care. And one thing that I really like about being in the wilderness is because weather doesn't care. You know, you have to take what you get and just deal with it. And I think, you know, it kind of makes you humble because you cannot control. There are certain things that you can control, and one of them is weather. And so when I moved into Iceland in 2005, the reason I went to Iceland, now Iceland, as you know, is a volcanic island. And everywhere you go, you see fumes coming out of the ground and geysers shooting up and what have you. So on top of some of these active volcanoes, there are glaciers. And I was curious to see what the effects are when one of these volcanoes erupts and all these millions of tons of ice suddenly melt. And where does all the water go? I didn't want it to happen when I was there, but I wanted to see what it was like when it had happened before. And I knew that back in the 1930s it happened, and I wanted to just go there and see what it looked like. Now here's an example here of a glacier that's sitting on top of an active volcano, and you can see that there was this heat underneath there that's actually melting this glacier down into kind of a cone shape. In fact, the water coming from that glacier is the headwaters of a river in Iceland. So who knows when this thing is going to erupt, but when it does, everything that you see that's white up there is going to turn into water. And when that happens, here's kind of what the devastation looks like. Now, from one side to the other is about 1.5 miles. And the water flows down this way, and that's for about 30 miles. Everything in that 30-mile stretch, the mountain all the way to the ocean, was gone. This was back in the 1930s, and there's still nothing there. It just wipes everything out. So there again, you know, it says, you know, that you're at the mercy of the elements when you go out there. So kept on walking. Weather started getting cold, and it started to snow. This was in August. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And then I got hit with this killer storm. This was the worst storm that I had ever been in my life. And I've been in a lot of bad weather. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse until finally there was nothing I could do except just hunker down and wait out because weather doesn't care. So finally I got back to Reykjavik. And there was a guy there and he said, "Hey, JR, how was the trip?" And I said, "That was really good, but you know what? About 10 days ago, I got hit with this really, really bad storm." And the guy says, "Oh yeah, that was a hurricane. That was a Category 5 hurricane." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, that's a hurricane. It was called Hurricane Katrina. And that was the hurricane that wiped down New Orleans." And I said, "New Orleans is wiped down?" He said, "Dude, New Orleans is gone, man. It's underwater." And when, after the hurricane wiped down New Orleans, it continued up the east coast of the U.S., and then it veered out again into the North Atlantic, where it picked up steam again, became a Category 5, and smashed right into the southern part of Iceland, where you were. And so, there again, you know, the lesson is, when you get caught in bad weather, there's nothing you could do about it. It doesn't matter where you have to go or who you have to see. You just have to just wait it out and realize that you mean nothing to weather because weather does not care. Number 7, my life. So, another, you know, I was up in the Yukon one time, and I was talking to this Native American gentleman, and we got to talking about wildlife. And I said, you know, I'd really like to see wildlife because I really believe that seeing wildlife, you know, in the wild is really, it's a privilege to see wildlife living the way that they actually live. And so on all my trips, I'd like to see some wildlife. And he says, you want to see wildlife? I can tell you how to do it in 3 words. Right? And these are the 3 words: sit, watch, and listen, and learn. So he explained to me this way. He said, when you're out walking in the wilderness, all of the animals out there, they know that you're coming. They can either see you, hear you, or smell you. And when they see that, when they sense that you're coming, what they then generally do is they kind of move out of the way and let you walk by. And then after you're gone, they come back and they do what they were doing before you got there. But if you stop and you sit and you're quiet and you don't make any sudden moves and you're patient, the animals out there will get this sense that you are not a threat and that you are not doing anything, and then they will begin to come back, even though you are still there. And so I gave it a try. Sure enough, you know, usually what happens, the first thing that happens is that usually the birds come back first. You know, so you look around, you can see the birds starting to come back. And then after a while, the smaller animals come back, the squirrels, the chipmunks, you start to see them. And then if you're patient enough, and if you're lucky enough, you'll begin to see the larger animals, the deer, the moose, the bear, or whatever. And then you can watch them and see how they go about their daily business or about their daily lives. And you can really learn what it's like for these animals living in harmony, living on their own, living in the wilderness, and it's fantastic. And so, sit, watch, and learn. Something I've been doing all these years, and having a camera, I was able to get some nice shots. Caribou here in the Northwest Territories, and these are muskox that I saw in Greenland. If you look kind of in the back there, you see my tent. It's very close to my campsite there. And this one was in Tanzania on safari. Thousands of animals within a couple of 100 yards in every direction. Just sit, watch, and learn. This is a python from the jungle in Costa Rica. Koala bear, of course, in Australia. And even when you don't see any wildlife there, you see what wildlife has done. So this beaver dam is one of the best beaver dams I've ever seen. Really strong. I was able to walk right across that. It's holding back really a lot of water. There's about a 2-foot difference between the water on the right-hand side and the water on the other side. And of course, when you wake up in the morning and you see grizzly tracks about 10 feet from your campsite, you begin to realize that, hey, you're really not at the top of the food chain there. That's kind of humbling too. But sit, watch, and learn, and it works great. You know, all you need is a little patience and some luck, and you can see whatever you can see. Be surprised at what you can see. So we get to 8, and this one here, people ask me about this a lot. Most of the trips that I've taken have been solo, especially over the last 25 years or so. But I'm not a hermit, I'm not misanthropic, I don't hate people, you know, I'm just a guy who likes being by himself. And what I like about being by myself is that I find it's an opportunity to learn more about who I am. You know, when you go out with a group of people, you're sharing, you're interacting. But when there's nobody there, and it's just you, and you're making all the decisions, and you have to do it all on your own, you really learn who you are. And if you're not really afraid to learn who you are, it can be really fascinating. So now, back in 1997, I was up in the Northwest Territories to do this hike on the Cattle Trail. The guy standing next to me, his name is Perry Minton. And back in 1997, this guy was the best bush pilot in northern Canada, according to him. And others. He was recommended to me. That was one of his planes. That plane is called a Heliocurion. It's got those big, long, wide wings. a very short plane, has big tundra tires. It's a short takeoff and landing plane, and you can use this plane to take off and land anywhere in the tundra. So we're standing here in a town called Norman Wells on the Mackenzie River. And my idea was this: I hired this guy to fly me from Norman Wells all the way out to the border between the Yukon and the Northwest Territories. And then I was going to walk back to Norman Wells. The distance is 233 miles. So what I wanted to do, on his way flying me out there, I had him land twice. And at each place I jumped out and I left a week's supply of food. And so when he dropped me off at the end, I was counting a week's supply. That got me to the first food drop. And then that week's supply got me to the second food drop. And then the third food drop got me back to Norman Wells. This was an area of 30,000 square miles. Not a single person lives there. There were no roads, there were no towns, there's no nothing. It's not a national park, it's not any kind of public land, so it's not patrolled by rangers or anything like that. It's like if you go out there, it's just you and you're on your own. And so took off. This is the landing strip at the end where he dropped me off. It's just a scraped out piece of tundra. He landed there, he had done the 2 food drops. I got out, and there's Perry flying back to Norman Wells. And let me tell you, you see that plane taking off, and you can't hear it anymore. That's when you know that you are really alone. This was a fantastic trip. Very few people do this route. I checked the website not too long ago, and over this summer, only 5 people did it, and it was a party of 3 and a party of 2, and they did it within a couple of days of each other, so basically they did it as a party of 5. But 5 people in the whole summer season. Beautiful mountains. This is the border of the Mackenzie Mountains. The trip back was over 6 mountain ranges back to Norman Wells. In the autumn, really beautiful, plenty of wildlife. And here's a campsite on the Godland River on what I considered that day was one of the best days I ever had in the wilderness. One of those days where everything just goes right, everything is beautiful. There's an incident about a chance encounter that I had with a dog out there that really factors in if you have the book or you're curious about the book. This is one of the stories in there about what happened. So, once in a lifetime experience. And so, when I finally got back to Norman Wells, I noticed that the flags, the Canadian flags were half-staffed. I assumed that some local dignitary had died. Norman Wells' population is only about 200, and 90% of them are Native Americans, or in Canada they call them First Nations people. And I assumed that some local dignitary had passed away, so I said, who died? They said, oh, that was Princess Diana. I said, yeah, Princess Diana, she died. Oh, yeah, and it was a auto accident in Paris, some big media coverage, there was a funeral, Elton John wrote a song about it, everybody's talking about it. So I'm surprised that the flag is still half-staffed. I said, when did it happen? He said, oh, that was like 2 weeks ago. I said, oh, wow. Then he looked at me and he said, you know what? He said, given the media coverage of that event, you would be one of the very few people on this earth who until this moment didn't know that she had died. And so that's just an idea of how isolated you can be and alone. And it turns out that the day that accident happened was this day right here. So good for me, so sad for so many other people. Brings us now to fear, number 9. So people ask me, are you ever afraid? And the short answer is yes. And the longer answer is damn right. I've been scared so many times. I am an expert on fear. If there was a PhD in fear, I would be Dr. Scared. you know, there's a lot to learn about fear, you know, and I learned it. For example, this trip here in Tasmania in 1992, in Southwest Islands track. Now, when I did this trip, I was 50 years old, 1992, and I thought that I was a pretty good backpacker. And I was saying to myself, you know, you really need a trip to show like what you can do, how much you know. And the other side of me is saying, that's stupid. You know, you got nothing to prove. Why would you want to go someplace that's really tough when, you know, you don't really have to? You know, but of course I don't often listen to myself. So I was on a plane to Patagonia. This was a really scary trip. Southwest Islands, a couple of things that were scary. You know, and fear really gets to you when there are just every day something happens that's scary, and this is a good place to do it. First thing that scared me was the terrain. If you look at these mountains in Southwest Islands, they're a very small mountain range, only about 50 miles long, but very, very steep. And it was constant up and down. And I was always afraid that I was going to slip and fall and really hurt myself because there was no real marked track or anything like that. It was just really a route. And so you're always paying attention. You're always, you know, in your mind it's just very, very draining when you're walking, and you're always afraid that you're going to fall and kill yourself. The second thing that bugged me was these leeches. Okay? And that's not my hand, by the way. And so you look down, and there's a leech on you. And when they start out, they're about that size. But they start sucking your blood, and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then when they get really bloated, they fall off. But there's an anticoagulant, and so you keep bleeding, and the bleeding doesn't stop. Now, it doesn't really hurt, to be honest, but those things are disgusting. When you get those things on you, I tried to pull that sucker off, and it wouldn't come off. And I was like, oh, man. You know, so you take a match just before lighters, you know, we carry waterproof matches. Anybody remember those days? I didn't think so. And so you light matches, you put everything falls off, but I was constantly looking to make sure these bloodsuckers weren't on me, and no matter how careful I was, they were there. It just gave me creeps. It was so scary. So then I make a camp here by this lake. This lake is called Haven Lake. Let's see if you can Haven Lake. It's a haven, you know, it's good. That night, the storm comes up, and in the middle of the night, it ripped my tent right out of the ground. And I staked my tent out really good. And I didn't believe that the storm was going to do that because this is a very good tent here. And I stayed it out so many times. Not only did it rip out of the ground, but in doing so, it blew all my possessions out into the middle of the night and some of them into the lake. And now here I am in my long johns and I had a headlamp running around trying to grab a sock and a plate and a cup and a sleeping bag and get it all together and then put the tent back together in the middle of the night. And I staked that sucker out with more rocks than the Great Wall of China. I wouldn't have let that thing blow away. But it's just a very fearful trip. And then, worst of all, was this picture right here. So I got lost, and I was really tired. And searching back and forth, trying to find the trail. And I said, let me put my pack down so I don't have to carry it. And then when I find the trail, I'll come back and pick up the pack. I found the trail, and then I kept my back to get my pack, and I couldn't find it. And I was wearing a t-shirt. It was getting dark, it was getting cold. And I knew that if I didn't find this pack before sun went down, then my chances of surviving the night were pretty slim because I was already freezing. I had first signs of hypothermia. I had no clothing, I had no tent, I had no food, I had nothing. Everything was in that pack. That's probably the scariest I've ever been. I can tell you I survived, but the whole story of all the details is also one of the chapters in the book. And so what about fear? You know, so there are different kinds of fear. In fact, let me just read you this brief excerpt from the book about fear. Fear shows itself in different ways. In a crisis that requires an instinctive and immediate reaction, you don't have time to be afraid. The fear comes when it's over, when you think about how close you came to catastrophe. Then there are times when the fear messes with your mind, vividly imagine a frightful scenario that in reality doesn't exist. The worst fear, however, is when it's right there in front of you. There's ample time to experience it when it simmers until it threatens to overwhelm. All these kinds of fears happen to me. This is how I became an expert on fear, or being afraid. So, I learned that one should never be afraid of being afraid. Fear is a part of life, and it can be a very healthy part, especially when you realize that in a life-threatening situation, it's possible to rise above panic and maintain control of rampaging emotions. I understood what having courage really is, not the absence of fear, but the acceptance of it. And it's a good lesson to learn because you never get too old to get scared. Take my word for it. So, there I am, you know, at the summit of Mount Capricorn in the Southwest Arctic. As scared as I was still taking these macho selfies. I really feel it. So that brings us to the 10th final. You know, people say, well, what is it? What's the impact? What have you learned? What's it all about after all these trips? When you think about all the time from the 1960s to 2018, and you know, if I had to summarize it in one word, that one word would be gratitude. Because I'm grateful that I was able to do these trips. I'm grateful that I'm able to still do them. I'm grateful for all the places that I've been, all the people that I've met, all the things that I've seen, all the things that I've experienced. It's been a long pull, but I've been really very fortunate, and I appreciate it. And, you know, as you kind of grow older, you get more appreciative of the experiences that you've had. And so, you know, as I look back on all these trips, the impact of it, the overall impact is one of appreciation and gratitude. So, you know, whether it's back in the 1960s, when I was up in the Yukon Territory, or in the 1980s, not too far from here, in Racket Lake. Who has cowboy boots on a canoe trip? I've smoked a corn cob pipe. What's the red hat? So, you know, Patagonia, I just finished doing the Knife Edge Trail up in Maine, 91, 98, Glacier National Park. And, you know, here's the highest mountain in Finland, Halti. I was there in 2006. And if you look at all these photos, including this one here was taken about 2 or 3 weeks ago, when I was up in the Dolomites. And if you ever went to my website on jrinthewilderness.com, you see a lot of other pictures. In every single picture, I'm smiling. You know, and I think that smile kind of says it all. You know, it says gratitude, it says appreciation, it says a love of a life, and living the dream about being in the wilderness. So, very quickly, what did I learn? 5 things. Of course, I learned a lot more than 5 things. But these 5 things, I think in particular, first to stay curious, you know, to cultivate an inquisitive mind, and embrace the opportunity to learn. You know, curiosity, again, it's the engine that drives exploration. And that's a key to opening the door of knowledge and experience. I learned to expand my comfort zone, you know, to try different things, to make new decisions, to put myself in different situations, just to see how I react, to see how I grow, to see how I mature. To trust my instincts, believe in yourself and have that confidence to make the decisions that need to be made, not only in the wilderness, but when you get back home. So a lot of these things have implications even after you get back from a trip. And as much as I love trekking and backpacking, I also realized that you need to do other things with your life. To broaden your scope, do something else besides that, and just not be a one-trick pony. It sounds counterintuitive, but if you do other things besides that one thing, you have a different perspective and a different way of seeing what you're doing and how it impacts you. So, diversifying. And finally, keeping perspective. Again, as much as I love trekking, I'm not finding a cure for cancer. I'm not bringing about world peace. I'm just putting one foot in front of the other. And so I need to make sure I keep that in its place, to remember that there are other priorities like family and friends. So those are the things that I've learned. And to kind of close this out, I just want to say that the wilderness can be a very rough place, it can be a savage place. But at the same time, it can be a fragile place and it really needs protection. And in order to protect it, you need to appreciate it. And in order to appreciate it, you need to experience it. And so the more people we can get out there to get in the outdoors at their own pace and at their own speed, to experience all the benefits that being in the outdoors can provide us, both physically, mentally, and emotionally, the more chance we have of protecting our public lands and keeping them safe from development and having them there for our kids and our grandkids when they grow older. So I'm hoping that these kind of talks that I give and the book that I wrote will kind of encourage people to get out, to explore, to get some fresh air, and maybe to learn kind of some of the lessons that I've learned. But whatever you do, my final thing is keep on trucking, baby. Thank you very much. Anybody has any questions? I'd be happy to take them. Yes, ma'am. Where am I going next? I'm planning either to go to Siberia or Mongolia. Mostly Siberia because over the last 15, 20 years or so, every couple of years, I went north of the Arctic Circle because I'm curious about people, as I said, who live kind of off the grid. And I've traveled all the way around the world from Alaska, the Yukon, the Nunavut, the Canadian land that they get back to the Inuit people, to Greenland, to Norway, up into Sweden, Finland, all above the Arctic Circle, all the way around visiting people that live up there. The only place I missed was northern Russia and Siberia. So I was curious to go there to complete the circle around the world and to, just for my own curiosity, to find out how people are similar and different when they are geographically similar above the Arctic Circle. If I don't get there, Mongolia, which has been closed for many, many years to outsiders, starting to open up now. So I'm thinking about doing that one. Yes, ma'am. So the question is, what places have impacted me the most? You know, it's a tough question to answer simply because every trip is so different. You know, they're all wilderness trips, but they all bring about different attitudes and different experiences. And so everyone is a learning experience. Everyone is important in some way, whether it turned out to be a good trip or a bad trip. I have a standard answer for that question when people ask me, which trip do I like the best, or which was most impactful, I would say the last one. You know, and in a sense, that's true. Yes, sir.
You described a trip where the bush plane dropped you off, and a week later you had to find it in cash. How did you find it?
No, you have to find it. When we took off from Norman Wells, he landed twice. I just jumped out of the plane and I put it there, so I knew exactly where it was. And then when I got back a week or 2 weeks later to pick it up, I knew it would be sitting there unless some animal got it, but I knew nobody would be there to take it. So I really didn't have to find it. I knew exactly where it was.
GPS or map?
No, I was following a route. There's a backstory to this. They call it Cattle Trail. Cattle means Canadian oil. And in World War II, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers built a pipeline from the Mackenzie River all the way across the Mackenzie Mountains into Alaska because they were afraid that the Japanese would be attacking North America from the Aleutian Islands and down the west coast, which they actually did. In Alaska, they hadn't discovered oil there yet. And so while the United States military was building air bases and the Alcan Highway, and they had planes and trucks and vehicles going up there was no gas. They couldn't bring it up by ship because they were afraid of Japanese submarines. So they decided to build this pipeline 550 miles across the Mackenzie Mountains. The pipeline was only about 7 inches in diameter, and they laid it on the ground. And it took them 2 years, but they actually got it finished. Unfortunately, by the time they finished the pipeline and the service road that runs next to it, the threat of invasion was gone. And the pipeline was so expensive to maintain that they shut it down, and nobody's ever heard of the Cattle Pipeline. The Cattle Pipeline project involved 2 years of work. 50,000 people worked on it. It cost $300 million, and nobody ever heard of it. It was more expensive than the Panama Canal. It was a bigger project than the Hoover Dam. Nobody ever heard of it. So they took some of the pipe out of it. The service road right next to it became overgrown. All the bridges across all the rivers got washed away. And so there was just no, in '97 when I went there, it was just an overgrown route through the mountains. So I was following an actual route that used to be a pipeline. That's also in the book, that whole story. Yes, sir.
When you were in Australia, the drought was making bad. How did you find oil plants?
First we prayed. All the water supplies, as I said, that were listed on the map, that were mostly always dry. And basically what it got down to was we would find a place to camp, we'd set up a campsite, and then the three of us would go off in 3 different directions and try to find some kind of water supply, either by undergrowth that needs water that we could dig and try to find it. Sometimes we found water dripping out, and we put a cup there and wait about an hour just to get a couple of ounces of water. Most of the time what we found was a filthy, muddy, slimy pool that hadn't dried out yet. And we were trying to filter it as best we could. And then we would try to, we filled up our water containers because we didn't know the next day we were going to find any. And so we would carry all that water in addition to all our supplies, and then maybe the next day, we would find something, so we carried the water for nothing. But it was always a struggle, and the real difficulty was not knowing if you were going to find it, because it was so hot. And if you've ever been without water for any length of time, you know your tongue starts to swell up, gets really dry, there's no moisture in your mouth, there's no saliva, and you can't chew anything, your mouth is just too dry. And it's really scary. Not something that I recommend, it's not really fun. But it is what it is. Yes, sir.
In your planning of trips, were there any conditions or considerations that cause you not to want to go alone?
No. I actually like going alone. I like the idea of putting stuff in a pack, putting it on my back, and then that's my worldly possessions. That's all I have in the world. And then I go someplace where there's nobody else there either. And I just have to just be on my own and live what I call a simpler life. And by simple, I don't mean easy, because simple is actually harder because you're doing it the simple way. But you're putting yourself out there. Now, the other thing I like is that anything I want to do, I can do it. If I want to eat, I eat. If I want to sleep, I sleep. If I want to stop, I stop. I don't have to ask anybody. I don't have to compromise. I don't have to deal with it. Every decision I make it fall from me. I could do anything I want. It's kind of selfish in a way, but I don't really care. I'm out there having a good time. I work. I own a consulting firm in New York City. I live in New York City. And in 1975, I started a consulting firm. Last Friday, October the 6th, was my 43rd year in business. And so my partner was my younger brother, and he was able to run the business while I could disappear for a month at a time, because a younger brother's job is to make his older brother's life happy. And I took advantage of it every single year. So I worked at it, and so I was able to finance these trips on my own. A couple more, yes sir.
You ever experience where you got hurt out there? What would you do if you got hurt out in the wilderness like that?
I never got hurt, seriously hurt, and I never got sick. I believe that there are two factors that made that possible. The first one being I became a very good planner. And so I was able to anticipate things that might go wrong and therefore kind of avoid them. And the second factor was luck, because you never know what's going to happen. And I've been very lucky. So it's better to be lucky than good looking. At least I know from the luck side. But no, I never got it.
I assume that consultancy is travel, is that true?
That what?
I assume that consultancy is for travel, is that your business?
That I travel for business?
You have a business.
I have a business. Huh? Oh, do I consult on travel? Oh, okay. Yeah, I consult on travel. My clients are Fortune 500 companies and government agencies, usually foreign governments. Most of my consulting is not about travel. It's for private corporations. It's marketing consulting. It's how to market their products and services to different diverse audiences. And my consulting with foreign governments is mostly helping them set up social marketing campaigns, such as saving the environment, anti-smoking, family planning, HIV prevention. I know how to get people to buy into these types of programs where if the government says, don't smoke, everybody's going to smoke. But if the government says, or if the government sponsors a program where people understand all the negativity about it, then there's a chance that they'll do it. And I was there when social marketing first started, kind of in the early 80s. So that's what.
Okay, just a minute, Jackson. I want to say something. We're going to have to close, but one thing I want you to know about JR is we invited him to come here We advertised and went to some city schools and rec centers to spread the word. And a school asked if he would come to their school, the World of Inquiry School 58, asked if he would come and talk to the students at the school about his experiences. So tomorrow, he's heading to School 58 to give them his story and encourage them to get out in the wilderness. We thank you all for coming. Jackson wants to say
in light of the number of guests that we have here this evening who are most likely unfamiliar with the Genesee Valley chapter of the Adirondack Club, if you'd like to enjoy watching his presentation again, or you'd like to share it with friends or family,